We are a couple of days now removed from Phil Mickelson making golf history at the PGA Championship. The question now has to be asked, what does the win mean for Phil Mickelson going forward? Where does he rank among the all-time golfers? And, how many more can Phil still win at the age of 50 and beyond? For more on that, we go out to the Progressive guest line right now. And we bring on a columnist for the New York Post, a golf insider himself. Mark Cannizzaro joins us right now here on the show. Mark, appreciate the time this morning. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jake. How you doing?
I'm hanging in. So I was reading your column yesterday, and I wanted to get you on the show. You did a great job kind of putting in perspective Phil Mickelson's accomplishment, what it means when compared to some other incredible golf feats. Let's kind of start there, Mark. Compared to what Tiger did at the Masters in 2019, what Jack did at age 46 winning the Masters, where does this one rank among the all-time great golf achievements?
Well, I think it absolutely ranks right up there with both of those. I mean, I did not cover Jack's win in '86, and that's been regarded by my colleagues in the golf media world as the greatest victory ever because of his status. Jack Nicklaus being the greatest of all time. Certainly, it was his 18th major championship victory, and he was 46 years old. Well, to that, you think about it. Phil was 4 years older, or is 4 years older than Jack when he accomplished it on Sunday. So that right there, and by the way, Phil has not even contended in a major championship since 2016 and hadn't won one in 8 years. So that alone there has to put it right up there. Certainly Tiger's, situation in '09 was amazing. One of the most amazing things I've covered in sports. But again, not to take anything away from it, but Tiger was in pretty good form going into that Masters. Phil was in horrific form. I mean, he was just lost in terms of his results. So I think in terms of the shock factor, Nicklaus certainly was a shock factor in '86. But if you're comparing it to Tiger, there was certainly more of a stun factor, Phil winning this major championship than there was Tiger in 19.
Mark, when did you think Phil had a legit chance to actually win this major?
That's a good question because, he had come out, if you recall, a couple of weeks earlier, he came out and shot 7 under par in his first round at Wells Fargo in Charlotte. And, the golf is in there for him. His issue has been, keeping his focus for 4 days. And he's been very, transparent about speaking about that and his struggles with that. And, he faded pretty dramatically in Charlotte after that opening round. So you kind of wondered, is there any way to keep this thing going? I would say, on Saturday when he had a 5-shot lead on the back 9 on Saturday, which unfortunately, he ended up leaking most of it away with those couple of bad swings on 12 and 13 off the tee. But I think the moment for me, this might actually happen, occurred when he was 10 under par and had a 5-shot lead. Right before he ended up, hitting those 2 bad tee shots on 12 and 13. But I must say, as the day began on Sunday, I just wasn't feeling it for Phil. I thought this was going to be too difficult a task. He was paired with Brooks. Koepka hadn't played well all week, in his mind, and yet he was still only a shot back. He's younger, stronger. He's unafraid. He's bold. We all know what kind of game he has. He's just had 1-2 out of the previous 3 PGAs. So to me, I thought Brooks was a hands-down favorite going into the final round. And so I kind of kept waiting for the other shoe to drop for Phil. Even when he bogeyed 1 and then there was a 2-shot swing and Brooks took the lead, I didn't think that was the end of the world because there was so much golf to be played. But, when Phil holed out on 5 from the bunker and I was standing right next to that bunker, I had this thought like, maybe this is meant to be. There's always those moments in tournaments so often that I've covered, excuse me, that something happens. A guy makes a certain whatever. He gets a great break. You can go down the line, the breaks that guys have gotten over the years. That was a moment I thought. I didn't think it won it for him, but I really thought when he holed out on 5 out of that bunker for birdie because he'd been wobbling on the first 4 holes. I was like, you know what, this might actually happen.
Mark Cannizzaro from the New York Post with us here. He, of course, was at the Ocean Course in South Carolina watching Phil Mickelson make history, winning the PGA Championship at the age of 50. So, Mark, when you consider that Phil had to go toe-to-toe with Brooks Koepka, a guy that's already won 4 majors, he's won the PGA twice, does it make the accomplishment that much more impressive knowing that a guy like Koepka was on his tail the whole final round?
I do think it does make it that much more impressive, and that's a good point. Because, and not taking anything away from any other player, but I'll just throw, say if he was dueling with Kevin Streelman, for example, who was right up on the leaderboard there. I think it's a whole different deal stabbing off Brooks Koepka than it is a Kevin Streelman, or, name your other tour player down the line. Even Louis Oosthuizen, who has a major championship to his credit. Brooks, to me, was probably the most intimidated figure you could have had in that final group for Phil. I'm not sure there's anybody else in the field that would have probably, maybe you could say Rory, but, Brooks just has this vibe about it being a little intimidating. So I think that was probably the most challenging playing partner Phil could have had in that final round, in my opinion. So I do think it adds to that in terms of his confidence.
Mark, how here's the question I've always had with someone who's covered Phil. He's so beloved by the fans, and I think the fans have always kind of stuck with Phil because he's been so good to them over the years. Do you get a sense that Phil was able to maybe truly take in the moment and appreciate the fact that for most of his career he's always been compared to Tiger? People have always said, he's never won as many major championships as he should have. Like that moment is now maybe the defining moment of his career, and I think he really got to feel the love from the crowd. That scene on 18 will be something we're playing probably for the rest of the time in golf. What's your take just kind of on the fan reaction and how Phil maybe has interacted with the crowd over the years?
Well, it was electric on Sunday. It was electric all week, but Sunday particularly. And Phil, to answer your question, Phil, there's no question he soaks it in. He adores that adulation. He cherishes it. And the reason he gets that reaction is because of the way he treats people. He doesn't stare down at the ground or look through people. He looks people in the eye when he's signing an autograph. He gives a thumbs up. All of that kind of reaction on Phil's part really was gleaned in a large part from Arnold Palmer. Phil got with Arnold, or certainly always idolized Arnold when he was younger, but he spoke to, when he was a young player, and he took to heart some of the things that Arnold told him about the way to treat the fans, make them feel involved, make them know that you notice them and you appreciate them. Unfortunately, there's too many athletes in general, but golfers, as we're talking about golf, that I don't believe do that. They don't get it. They just don't get it, and Phil does get it. He always has gotten it. And that is felt by the galleries and the people. And because of that, they cherish, they adore him. And, if you throw on top of that, he's always been one of the most thrilling players to watch in the sport, so he's an easy golfer, not taking the person out of it. If you just look at him as Phil Mickelson, the golfer, it's pretty fun to root for a guy like that because he's always, delivering drama. And so you throw all of that together, that combo platter is pretty powerful. And he loves that. He really loves it. He signs more autographs than any athlete I've ever seen in any sport that I've covered. And he will. And he does it not after winning. I'll never forget a moment at the 2009 U.S. Open at Bethpage Black here in New York. His wife had just, she was back home battling breast cancer. He had one of his another near misses in the U.S. Open. It was a tight, he had a chance down the stretch and just couldn't get it done the last few holes. And I remember being out the front driveway area where he was on his way out to his car, and there was an area that probably about 50 people out there in this little near the cul-de-sac there, and or the circle, I should say, and they were. Phil stood there and he signed every single person's autograph. I mean, that's a guy that could have just wanted to slink into his car, get to the airport and get onto his plane and get home as fast as possible and see his wife and just kind of forget the disappointment. And he stood there for an hour signing autographs for people before he left. You don't have to do that. You can slip out the back door. You can, there's ways to do these kind of things, and he doesn't do that. So all of that stuff makes him, who he is, and makes the fan experience for around him, so special.
Mark Cannizzaro for the New York Post with us here. Mark, you wrote in the Post that Phil Mickelson solidifies his golf legacy with that major championship win on Sunday. As far as where he ranks now all time, what's your take there? Where would you put Phil among the pantheon of the all-time great golfers?
Well, as I mentioned in my column in the Post, and again, this is all subjective, and I've, certainly I've got the expected pushback in some, some reader email back, but I really feel like this pushes him up toward the top 5 of all time. There are guys that have more majors than Phil right now. There's 11, I believe there's 11 players that have got more majors than he does. And obviously you've got Jack and Tiger, Gary Player, Ben Hogan. You throw those guys in there and Arnold. But, you've got, again, I'm not taking anything away from these gentlemen that won these majors, but, like a Walter Hagen won 11 major championships. But in that era, were the fields that deep? Was it that difficult? You can't make the argument in good conscience and tell me that it's not easier. It wasn't easier to win a major championship back then than it is now. I mean, the fields, the competition and the fields are so deep. The talent level is so deep. Not to mention the fact that Phil's prime went head to head, toe to toe against Tiger. In his prime. So you have to take that into account. We always talk about part of the greatness of Jack Nicklaus, where he has 18 major championships and 19 runners-up in majors, right? Well, I take into account Phil's 6 runners-up at U.S. Open, the only major he hasn't won. And that, to show that he's put himself there that many times, even though he hasn't broken through yet. I made a comparison with Tom Watson, for example. Watson has 8 majors, but 5 of those majors are British Opens. So clearly, he was an amazing links golf player in his day. That was his strength. Yes, he won 3 other majors. I get it, but so I mean, again, it's totally subjective. I'm not trying to say, hey, Phil Mickelson's better than Tom Watson or whatever, but I feel like Phil has pushed himself with this win. This was such an iconic victory for all the reasons we've spoken about just this morning here. His age, where his form was at, the level of competition, everything. I think this absolutely pushes him up in and around the top 5 of all time, in my opinion.
He's Mark Cannizzaro, New York Post columnist, was on site watching Phil Mickelson become the oldest golfer to ever win a major championship. Mark, appreciate your time. Great insight. Go Ithaca College Bombers, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Go Bombers. Good to talk to you, Jake.
Mark Cannizzaro for the New York Post with us there. Great insight from Mark, and I highly encourage you to check out his column. He wrote about what Phil Mickelson accomplished and, of course, where he now ranks among the game's greats in the history of the sport. Mark joined us there on the Progressive guest line. Drivers who save with Progressive save over $750 on average. We'll take a quick break, wrap up hour 1 of our program. This is the Jake Asman Show here on Sports Map Radio.
The Jake Asman Show.
Roger Goodell has got